So welcome to my journey navigating through the intricacies of the beautiful game. Firstly, the two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. So I was very lucky to find out earlier on in my life what my mission was, but it was nothing as charismatic or epic as these superheroines, unfortunately. I still remember the day, just like yesterday, when I was sitting in a doctor's office and I was diagnosed with advanced scoliosis. And the doctor was telling me I couldn't skate, ski, climb trees, ride horses, and possibly even have children in the future. As an 8-year-old, I couldn't quite understand what this all meant, but when I saw tears appearing in the corners of my mother's beautiful blue eyes and the grave look on my father's face, I knew that something was seriously wrong. So it was as if all of a sudden someone had pulled the plug that held together all the unconditional love that I held until that point in time. It was devastating, but being the little resourceful girl I was, I quickly realized that if I were simply successful, my parents and everybody else would love me again. So I decided to become a trailblazer who breaks barriers and embarked on a mission of big achievements, one after the other. I went to a high school in Istanbul, then went on to Brown University to study economics and international relations, graduated magna cum laude, landed an amazing job on Wall Street. And in my second year, I was applying to Harvard Business School when my boyfriend, who was living in Turkey at the time, he proposed. And I was so ecstatic, so excited. I said yes, pulled back my application, and the good news is we're still married, and he's sitting right there, my wonderful husband. And we have two beautiful children. Our son, Alp, is a freshman at Brown, studying neuromusicology and going on to medical school, hopefully eventually. Our daughter, Ella, is a freshman at UCLA. She is studying cognitive science and wants to become a journalist afterwards. So among all my achievements in life, the most proud moment is for me to be part of this beautiful family who stood by me throughout all the crazy things that I was doing throughout my life. So after moving back to Turkey, I started working at Citibank as an investment banker. And then in '99, when I had my son, I switched to an American PE fund. And the first day on the job, they sent me to a meeting with Galatasaray because the president of the club at the time was my former M&A client from Citibank. And 8 months later, the fund ended up buying 20% shares in Galatasaray. And on the same day, my second child, my daughter, was born. 3 weeks after giving birth, I was called into the office of my boss, and he said to me, well, Ebru, with two very young children, we don't think you can keep up with the pace of the fund anymore. This is year 2000, so in Turkey it was still okay to say things like this. So we are going to terminate your contract, but we can recommend you to Galatasaray as a CFO. I was furious. I went out and hired a lawyer. I was going to sue the pants off the PE fund. And the president of Galatasaray called me and said, are you crazy? Come work for us for 6 months. And if you don't like it, you can still open your court case after 6 months. So I got out of my comfort zone and went into the world of magic for the next 16 years, basically. And during my time at Galatasaray, I worked with 6 different presidents and 10 different boards. The cat had 9 lives. I survived every single presidential change. And it was an amazing journey for me, full of victories, but big challenges as well. And the one being, of course, as a woman, being the CEO of the club. So one of the difficulties was to explain to people what I did for a living. And especially my children couldn't quite understand what I was doing. So when they were 3 and 4 years old, we went on a ski trip on the weekend, and on a Sunday we were driving back from the mountains, and that was the day of the big derby, Galatasaray against Fenerbahce. Life stops when that's happening. And I was gonna get off the ferry and run over to the stadium for the match. And the kids kept asking me, Mom, you know, why do you have to go? I said, well, I'm working with Galatasaray. So what do you do at Galatasaray? So I said, well, you know how we go to the stadium sometimes? We try to make sure that the stadium is in order and everybody is really happy there. 5 minutes later, my son asks, Mom, what do you do at Galatasaray? I'm like, okay, you know how sometimes we watch on TV, you know, we produce that and make sure that everyone that's not in the stadium can watch the game. 5 minutes later, my daughter, Mom, what do you do at Galatasaray? I'm like, okay, you know the jerseys you wear, we make them and we sell them. So it was quiet for 5 minutes. I turned around, did you understand what I do? They were like, yeah, you're a football player. Why on earth would you go after a ski trip on a Sunday night to the stadium? You have to be a football player. So in 2009, I was called to the office of the president one day, and he told me that I was going to be responsible from the stadium construction project. And I said, oh, no, that must be a mistake. I know nothing about construction. And it was just after the 2008 big global economic crisis. The construction had stopped for 6 months. The stadium was looking like this. And the construction company had gone bankrupt. So the president said, think about it, come back tomorrow. So I went the next day. I said no. He said, think about it. So for 5 days, you know, we went back and forth. And finally on the Friday, I even tried pouring some tears, saying, I really don't want to do this. And then he told me, don't you see, this is the most important project of the club. It's going to change the face of the club for the next decades to come. And you're my most trusted employee, so I cannot give this project to somebody else. So, challenge accepted. You know, I went home that weekend, rolled up the sleeves, thought about how to manage this project, brought in experts from all over the world. We had an amazing project team. And only 13 months later, the stadium was complete. And on the day of the opening, it was one of the proudest moments in my life. It was as if I gave birth to my 3rd child. So once this challenge was over, of course, I had to look for new challenges. And kind of the why not moment that Courtney has been talking about. European Club Association, which is the highest governing body in European football, was going to hold elections for its new board. And never in its history had a woman run for office before. And I said, why not? So I nominated myself. Everyone thought it was very courageous and cute, but that I would never win. So for the next 2 months, I went around lobbying to all the clubs and explaining why I would be actually a great board member. On the day of the elections, each one that was elected was... we were called up to stage one by one, and when my name was read as the one that received the most votes, everybody was like, you know, very surprised. But quickly they recovered, and 300 people were giving me a standing ovation. And I had the privilege and honor to serve alongside the greatest names in football, like Karl-Heinz Rummenigge as the chair, presidents of Real Madrid and Barcelona, CEOs of Manchester United, AC Milan. So this was definitely one of the best moments in my life, followed by the Oscar moment. 2011, I was the recipient of the Executive of the Year award by Stadium Business Awards for completing Galatasaray Stadium in a very difficult economic time, but more importantly, breaking down the boardroom barriers and hopefully paving the way for more women in football. So things were on a roll, and I actually got an offer to become the first female general secretary of the Turkish Football Federation, and I would be the 3rd one in the world. So it was very prestigious, but I was extremely hesitant because it was during the match-fixing investigations in Turkey back in 2011. But I was given assurances by the president of the FA that I would only work on a major restructuring project, which I concluded in 2 months, and we were praised by FIFA, given an award, and I was asked to go and speak at the General Secretary's workshop. And while I was on stage, it was a wonderful presentation. I sat down, looked at my phone. There were 38 missed calls. I'm like, okay, we either had another revolution or, you know, earthquake or something happened in the family. But apparently, while I was on stage praising the president who recruited me to the FA, they had resigned because they couldn't take the pressures of the match-fixing investigations any longer. So, 2 months, this was 2 months into the job, and I remained for the next 2 months before the elections. And with the new president, it became very obvious that we had different working styles. I didn't want to work with him, he didn't want to work with me. So 4 months, 5 days later, I was out of my dream job. And by that time, my position at Galatasaray was taken, so I was quite devastated. But nevertheless, we went on vacation to Disneyland in Florida. And again, doing rides and whatever, all of a sudden, you know, I have this urge to look at my phone, this time 28 missed calls. I'm like, oh shit, something is happening again. And this was journalists calling from Turkey saying that the president of the opposing club actually had come out of jail. He was holding a press conference and starting a defamation campaign for me as the general secretary, as well as the vice chairman and head of legal of the FA, for cooperating as part of our job with the authorities about the whole investigation. So what followed was extremely ugly. I had death threats, threats to rape my daughter, abduct my son. They were calling me names that I cannot repeat here, and it was the worst time in my life. I didn't know how to cope with this. And the government actually offered me private security, thinking that maybe I would be harmed by the fans of the opposing teams. But I thought about it, and then I said, if there's anyone out there stupid enough to believe these lies, that I was doing nothing more than what my job description dictated, then come and find me. I'm here. So every now and then, these attacks still go on, but they're much less now. So I was getting back on my feet. A couple months later, I ran for elections at Galatasaray. I was elected a board member. So things started looking good again. But I didn't know that life was getting ready to throw another challenge at me. So you see these kinds of news on the 3rd page every day. This is basically saying health scandal. First the babies were mixed and then the mother died. This is actually my brother and his wife. So it was their first baby. I was speaking at Soccerex at Manchester, and I got the call that my nephew was born, took the first flight back, went to the hospital, took lots of pictures, posted them on social media. And the next day, my sister-in-law calls me, and she says, she's frantic. She's like, take off those pictures. That's not my baby. That's not my baby. I'm like, what do you mean that's not your baby? The hospital had apparently mixed up the babies, gave the wrong mother the wrong baby, but 24 hours later, they realized their mistake. But of course, it was very devastating for her. There was also something wrong with her health, but she was nevertheless discharged after 5 days. And on the 7th day, we are sitting at the board meeting at Galatasaray and actually debating whether to resign as a board and president or not, because we were under a lot of fire from the delegates and the members and the fans. So my brother is calling me, and I can't answer the phone because I'm in the board meeting, and he finally texts me saying, you have to come. My wife is having a brain hemorrhage. So being the responsible person I am, I couldn't get out of the meeting immediately because we hadn't voted yet about whether to resign or not. So I sat there for another hour, finally got out, went to the hospital. She was already in a coma, unfortunately. And she remained in a coma for 26 days. Every night, there were hundreds of people who even don't know her, coming to the hospital and praying. But unfortunately, she didn't survive. So she was, Mert was less than even a month when we lost her. This time, I was completely devastated in 1,000 pieces. I really didn't know how to pull everything back together. But then I remember the famous quote from Nelson Mandela: "The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." So I knew I had to do something, and that I was the one to pull everybody together. And I went up to my wonderful husband, who has the biggest heart I have ever seen. He looked at me in the eye and he said, "I know what you're going to say, let's do it." So we asked my brother and our nephew to move in with us. So for the last 2 years, we've been living all together. 2 teenagers, 3 adults, 1 baby, 2 dogs. A little happy, crazy house, but that was the only way we could get out of this family tragedy. So that was the point when I realized that there must be many women out there that are facing significant challenges in their lives like me. So I decided to devise a leadership program for Fifa, which was taught in more than 40 countries, half of which I delivered personally myself. This is Palestine, India, Cook Islands, South Africa. So you would think that my ambitions might tone down after having lived all this, but when you're a high-achieving personality like me, your ambitions never stop. So for my scoliosis, I used to swim when I was a child, but for many years I never won a single medal in my life. So I picked up swimming again, and in masters category at the age of 46, I won my one and only gold medal. So when I showed this... When I showed this picture to my kids, they kept teasing me, "Mom, why isn't there anyone else on the podium? Were you swimming alone?" And I get angry and I say to them, you know, "Did I swim? Yes. Did I finish the race? Yes. Did I get my medal? Yes. So no more questions." You know? I started playing football 3 years ago at the age of 47. You saw me with this jersey today, very proud. And remember Harvard. So at the end of 2016, I went up to the family, gathered everybody, and I said, it's been 25 years, and there hasn't been a single day that I don't think about Harvard. So everybody said, "Go, we'll cover your back." In 2017, in the spring, I went for the advanced management program. One of the best time in my life, and I got my graduate degree now, proud graduate of Harvard Business School. So never leave a dream behind, even if it takes 25 years to achieve it. So it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, but to know that by telling my story, I was able to help lots of people move across in their personal journeys. And all this has actually helped me to finally see beyond the body that this 8-year-old girl was trapped in, and look at things with a different perspective and redefine success. So for me now, success is about being authentic, and it starts with being true to yourself. Success is not letting boundaries inhibit you, but actually bring out the genius in you. Success is about remaining curious. Creativity is what will distinguish us from AI in the future. Success is about making a difference in the lives of others, having empathy, being able to listen and see from the eyes of the others. And for me, very importantly, success is about helping build a future that we would like our children to live in. I could go through the whole alphabet, but I'm just going to say one last thing. No matter what kind of challenges life throws at you, remaining grateful to be simply alive, because life is beautiful. Thank you.